They chose a site near Bear Butte, and because right in this area, three major gold trails converged and then moved up into the hills. We had the Bismarck Trail coming down from the north, the Fort Pierre Trail coming from the east, the Sydney Trail coming up from the south. They all met right here in the Sturgis area before going up into the gold fields of Deadwood. You know, Fort Meade has had a lot of influence in our country. It's been involved in a lot of big events. One of them was in 1892. Colonel Carleton was the commander of the 8th Cavalry, and because of an order that he issued at Fort Meade, it started in movement a process that ended up almost 40 years later with the Star-Spangled Banner becoming our national anthem. In 1892, he issued the order that made that song mandatory to be played at the retreat ceremony of the flag every night at the fort. From there, that tradition spread throughout the military and eventually became our national anthem. In 1932, Fort Meade was involved in the launching of Explorer 2, which set a manned altitude record that lasted for almost 70 years. That record also, on that flight of that balloon, they took the first photograph that showed the curvature of the Earth from outer space. And Fort Meade was involved there. A few years later, Fort Meade became the site of the headquarters camp for the Civilian Conservation Corps, which, if you've done any hiking here in the Black Hills or enjoyed any of our lakes, well, the Civilian Conservation Corps is responsible for a lot of the beauty and the chances we have to enjoy the Black Hills. Fort Meade stopped being a military post in 1944, and at that time it was transferred over and it became a hospital to serve our veterans. Also in 1944, we still had a prisoner of war camp out at Fort Meade. We had prisoners from the German army. Right now I'd like you to meet some of the people that we have buried up at the Fort Meade National Cemetery.
Hi there, nice to see all of you. I don't get much company up here. Part of the problem is I don't know my family, my name, or even how old I am. You see, my headstone simply says unknown child.
Charles Erickson, but you can call me Chaz. Most everyone else did. Still seems kind of strange to me that I'm up here on this hill. Why, blame it all, I had me a right smart little farm over on the Belfouche River next to Bale. And I was making pretty good money teaming up with the Army here at Fort Meade. But I missed home. And then my pa, over by Vermilion, took sick and died, leaving my ma a widow. So I decided to sell my farm and head back east to take care of her. Like I said, things didn't turn out that way. I'd been feeling kind of dragged out, but when you got a job to do, you can't just lie around. After all, without hard work, nothing will grow but weeds. Anyway, I was making a delivery to Fort Meade, and the next thing you know, I was waking up in the post hospital.
One of the wives of one of the soldiers.
Good afternoon. It's always a pleasure to have company. People seem to be few and far between out here in 1903, especially after living in New York State. Let me introduce myself. I'm Mary Jewell, the proud wife of Dr. Charles Jewell, veterinarian for the 13th Cavalry, and mother of a new baby boy, Eugene B. Jewell. My husband recently graduated from the veterinarian department at Cornell University and was assigned to fill the post here at Fort Meade. We arrived by train and stayed at the Hotel Scullard. If the long trip across the state did nothing else, it gave me a great appreciation for those who traveled by wagon not so long ago.
This member is one of the few people buried up there who has actually died in the line of duty. Most of them died of more natural causes, although I guess getting shot could be considered a natural cause when you're serving in the cavalry. So anyway, our next member.
Private Charles A. McKinnich, Company M, 13th U.S. Cavalry at your service. And proud to be part of the only cavalry regiment, not from somewhere else, but organized right here at Fort Meade. At the turn of the century, we got to see a lot of new changes at the old fort, as the old wooden barracks were torn down and replaced with brick and sandstone structures. A good piece of that work was done by some names you might recognize. William Grahams did a lot of the sandstone work, including the new guardhouse. Well, that's the fort's post office now. And H.O. Anderson down the block supplied our heating and plumbing fixtures. Yes, sir. With new heating, plumbing, and a new water system, we were ready to move into the 20th century in style. Not only did we do our part to improve the fort, but we did also our part to improve the local economy through the building, construction, and other ways. You see, in 1901, the Army decided to close Post Canteen, and that forced the troops to come into town for their own liquor refreshment. And that kind of relates to how I ended up in the cemetery. All in all, I didn't spend much time at Fort Meade, enlisted sometime in July and came to my end in September, in the line of duty, you might say. You see, it was my turn for guard duty when one of the men came to barracks, very much under the influence. He had gotten a hold of his gun and he was shooting it randomly, cursing at everyone. He even wounded a corporal. He ran outside where a guard, seeing him about to fire into the barracks, fired and wounded him, the bullet passing through his side. Unfortunately, I came around the corner at that exact same moment, and I caught that very same bullet in my stomach. Being at the cemetery, I've had a lot of time to think, and I got pondering. The good book says, man has no greater love than to give his life for a friend. I just wonder if the same goes for someone who just so happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. If you get it figured out, go on up there and let me know.
At the cemetery, we have 2 or 3 rather unusual burials, and our final presentation is going to be about one of those.
I'm not here today to talk about myself, but I'm here to share with you about one of the more unusual people here at this hill. He was a highly decorated member of the 4th Cavalry who died at the age of 5 years old, weighing a healthy 1,245 pounds. His name was Indian's Lament, and he was a much beloved man of the men of the 4th Cavalry. You know, back in my day, it would have been hard to imagine the cavalry without horses, but by 1938, the handwriting was on the wall as more and more units became partially or fully mechanized. Then in 1938, the 4th Cavalry, to continue to show the value of the cavalry, was called to go on the last long march that a mounted cavalry unit made from Fort Meade, South Dakota to Pole Mountain, Wyoming. It was a large army exercise that was supposed to last over a week. But the men of the 4th Cavalry and their trusty mounts ended that in one day when they crossed over a mountain pass that was supposed to be impassable to mounted troops and captured the commanding general, his headquarters, and the entire headquarters company, thus ending that exercise. And it didn't stop there. In 1941, a cavalry charge in the Philippines routed a much larger force of Japanese troops and forced them across a river that allowed some troops of the United States to make a successful withdrawal to safety. Then in 1942, in April of that year, the men of the 4th Cavalry were called to Omaha, Nebraska to participate in the Army Day Parade, and while they were there, the commanding officer of the 4th, Colonel Tully, received orders that the 4th was to be dismounted.